the last fundraising that Fenergo did was in September 21, and Insight were brought out, and Bridgepoint came in, and that came in on a valuation of 1.21 billion. When I say that again,
please do, for the people not listening at home or driving their cars going, wait, what?
1.21 billion. I only know one way, and that's to go hard. I don't know any other way. I don't know any other scaled business can do it without going hard. What does hard mean? It means long days, long nights. It means weekends, all of that. Being an entrepreneur in many ways is a lifestyle choice. And the choice is that you don't have a lifestyle until you get that business to a particular place where you can, start paying yourself a decent amount of money, start enjoying the fruits of it, etc. Some people think that comes fast. I never experienced that.
John, welcome to the pod.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. If I had €1 for every time your name was mentioned about, do you know who you should get? And I got you.
Well, listen, if you give me 50% of that euro, we'll get more people in here. Don't worry about it.
There's always a deal to be done.
Always a deal.
How you keeping?
I'm really good. Yeah, really good. Yeah. In a good place. I'm enjoying what I'm doing most of the time. Yeah, I'm in good place.
What are you doing?
So, 3.5 years ago, I stepped out of my role as CEO in Ergo. I've been doing that for 28 years and still had a huge amount of energy and grow for it. But I felt if the business was going to continue to develop at a pace, that probably needed a new lens. And I talk a lot to CEOs about having the right people on the pitch and sometimes having to change out the people. So I changed myself out. And I swapped roles with our chair, Paul McCann, the ex-managing partner of Grant Thornton. He'd been our chair for 8 years, so he knew the business, not necessarily the market, but he's a great, a super networker, and he's a great deal maker. I often slag Paul that even though he has a qualification as an accountant, he's not really an accountant. He maybe bought that cert on the internet or something.
I think that's the best compliment you can give anyone. You're an accountant, but I wouldn't guess it.
But I promised him and I promised myself on my last day that I wouldn't meddle. I wouldn't look over his shoulder. And I don't think people believe that. But I was absolutely adamant. And to first 3 months, every morning as I was showering, I would tell myself I'm not the CEO of Ergo. So I'd get calls from customers, from colleagues, asking me for a point of view. And the answer was, you better talk to Paul. You better talk to Paul. And that stopped after maybe 8 or so weeks. But the reason why I haven't meddled is because I've created a new chapter. And my new chapter is working with about 6 startup scale-ups who I've invested in. And I either chair or sit on the board. And I try and help those founders navigate through the journey it is to build a successful scaling business. I have a couple of guidelines. One is that they have to have a growth mindset, so they have to want to scale, preferably off the island. I will say that I am a active non-exec. What that means is that I'm not going to show up just for board meetings, but I'm there to do other pieces of work if they need me. And certainly we'll be talking at least once a week to see how I can help them, how things are going. Moving off the island is a big part of that whole scaling journey. The one thing that I also ask them is that I'm not claiming I know all the answers, but I have learned some stuff over 30 years. And at least they can do is listen. If they don't want to listen, well, then they shouldn't have me in the place.
We very rarely do we start at the end, but I feel there's a lot there we need to unpack first. Talk to me there, but what was the decision to step down? Because you seem like a very driven individual, full of energy. Where did that decision come from?
So it was bubbling over COVID. And look, as we all know, we spent a lot of time alone over COVID. So, my evening walks, that was kind of going through my head. And I kept questioning myself, even though I felt the business was going well, but could it be going better? Did it need a different lens? I shouldn't think that I'm the only one that can run this business. I shouldn't think that someone couldn't do it better than me. And, people have said to me since I stepped out, the business is at 120 million. Last Monday, it closed its most recent financial year end, and it closed at 230 million.
Whoa.
Yeah. Half of that came through acquisition, which an acquisition that I started the year I stepped out and Paul finished, and then Paul started and finished another acquisition. That accounts for about 50% of that delta. But the other 50% is from the organic business. And again, that was something that Paul and I discussed and agreed that growth could not just come from acquisition. Some people ask me now that the business has doubled, do I regret stepping out? And I laugh at them.
I was going to say, that sounds like a stupid question. I was like, I'd be delighted.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, the value of the business has doubled since he came in. So why would I not be happy? Let's bring it on.
You still have a stake in the business, right?
I'm the majority shareholder. I'm the non-exec chair. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So talk to me there about the process, though, because it's so unusual to hear a CEO say, look, I knew it was time to step down and I wasn't going to meddle. Because then usually about 10 minutes later, we're talking about how the new CEO messed it up and they had to come back to save it and da-da-da. You seem very deliberate about, like, I'm stepping down and I'm not stepping back in to meddle. How did you do that? You said in the shower every morning. Like, that's easier said than done, because you've built this for how long? 28 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
What does it do, by the way? What does the business do?
So I was asked by a journalist recently that, I've been working for the same organization for the guts of 30 years. And what was that like? And I said, I haven't been working with the organization for 30 years. I've worked with about 5 different organizations, all of which had the same name. And the business is very comfortable with change. And we hire people who are comfortable with change. And induction, one of the things that people are told, that if you're not happy with change, you should go and work for a competitor. Because our business is evolving all the time. We just do not stand still. As soon as we hit one milestone, we're on to the next one. We have a rolling 3-year plan around customer acquisitions, around geography, around technology, all of those kind of things. So we're a broad-based IT managed services business. So what that means is that we manage as much of an organization's IT as they want us to manage.
Okay.
And that can be from basic levels right up to, we work for I think there's 5 or 6 aircraft leasing companies in Ireland. We work for the top, we work for, I think, 4, and we work for the top 2, which are AirCap and SMBC. A couple of years ago, AirCap bought GE Aviation, and we, from a technology point of view, had to fold GE into AirCap in a live environment, no downtime, and a phenomenal piece of work. But that's what we do. So we allow organizations get on with their business, and we run their IT. We're doing that now with 700 plus people. We're in 7 countries. Our organic growth from our organic business is about 20% year on year, and then we've got the acquisition growth that comes with that as well. So it's quite a big beast now. But it started very humbly with my co-founder, the late Tim Sheehy, who was a great friend. It started in his garage in 239 Carver Road, and the administration headquarters was a box bedroom in my house in Blackrock, and we had to move out of that because my wife became pregnant and we needed to put the son somewhere. In the first number of years, we were whatever 2 levels below lean is we were that. So we moved from the 239 Cabra Road, and we moved to a shed in Crossguns Bridge. And the guy who owned the shed had across the yard had a beautifully renovated train station and stunning architecture, antiques, etc. And across the yard, he had this galvanized roof, tarmac floor shed, and that became our office for about 3 years.
What were you doing?
What were we doing?
Yeah, what were you doing back then?
We were selling and maintaining printers.
Okay.
It did have electricity, but it didn't have running water. So in the morning, we'd literally fill up the kettle with a standpipe in the yard. If we didn't have a loo, so we're waiting on our landlord to come in at 10 o'clock before we could use the loo. So that obviously created some challenges from time to time. Every evening, I would take the mugs and put them in a yellow basin, and I'd bring them home, and I'd bring them back the next day washed. So when we say lean, we really mean lean.
Long way from managed offices you were reared.
Absolutely.
But that makes you, I don't know, like I always love hearing, that's the beauty of this, is that it's long form. So we get over an hour and a half, we get to talk really about the evolution of stuff, because too often nowadays it's all these sound bites. People hear you saying something slick online, they're like, oh cool, but they don't understand this. They don't remember. You started in a shed, maintaining printers.
Yeah.
Like that's a long way from today. Like there's just beautiful evolution.
And we try in some way. We don't want to live in the past.
No, but you've got to what's the word? Not reflect on it, but you got to like recognize it. You got to not celebrate it either, but kind of go, this is it.
But if you go into the office in East Point, you'll see a timeline along the walls of when we started, where we lived, where we operated the business from, big customer wins, strategic technology pieces that we did, acquisitions that we've done, etc. Because it's really important for us that people understand where we've come from. We're quite happy to go into a bid as the underdog, and that we're fighting to be number one. We're quite happy to be in that position, because to me it drives a certain energy. I remember we were doing this branding exercise, and we had this great guy, a guy called Kieran O'Gara, and he was facilitating and doing it. So we're in a hotel room, and there's all of our senior team, and Kieran turns to the group and he said, "So, if Ergo was a car, what car would it be?" And the consensus was that it was a Volkswagen Passat with a tow bar. Okay, so strong, sturdy, not flash, got a job done. And he said if Ergo was a football team, what football team would be? And there was only one answer to that, and that was Manchester United. Okay, because that's where my
oh god, we've a lot to talk about.
Absolutely, but look,
we might have to cancel the business pod just to a United pod here.
Well, look. We a
Passat United. I think we're more a Passat nowadays.
Yeah, let's connect the Manchester United story to Succession in a moment, okay?
Okay.
Because I've got very very clear thoughts on that.
Okay, I'd love to hear where this is going. Go on.
So he then said to so it would be Man United, and there was kind of silence in the room. And I said, I need to give you my perspective on this. So. For complete transparency, I'm from the north side. I'm from Finglas. I fell in love with a woman who wanted to live on the south side, and I now live on the south side. So I can straddle both sides of the Liffey.
Every great love story.
But I said, to me, Ergo is north side. It has that grit about it. It's north side. It's working class. And I started, without even thinking about it, I started going into the Jimmy Rabbit moment when he was given on the steps. Do you remember that moment?
I do.
Yeah.
Great film.
And I didn't quite go all the way where he referenced a certain race of people. Yeah. But it was very much in that vein. I remember the head of marketing, Kira, at the time going, holy crap. is this is where this day is going to go.
That's never going to make the brochure.
No. But yeah, so the piece about Man United and succession. So first of all, I have to tell you that Tim, who was my co-founder, and Alex were great friends.
No way.
Yeah. And so we'd have customers over at midweek games, particularly Champions League games. And you could never guarantee it was going to happen, but it never didn't happen. Where at halftime, I'd get a text from Alex's PA, and the text would read, "Alex, here's you're in the ground. Bring your guests around for a couple of glasses of wine." So after the game,
prospective clients were like, sign us up right
absolutely.
now. Don't even wait till I have full time. Sign us up right now.
So after the game, we'd make our way down to this lounge. You'd never know who you'd meet in the lounge. I met the chairman of Marks and Spencer in there one night. I met Bobby Robson in there one night. You'd meet old players. And I measured the man. There was this elderly man. I'd seen him a number of times. And eventually I said, "Who's Hamey?" So Hamey, by his name, was a Scottish man. He was Alex's taxi guy when Alex arrived in Manchester. He didn't know where he was going. And he became a guest of Alex at every home game until he died.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I love stories like that.
So I talk about having the right people on the pitch, okay? And I talk about when you're moving from startup to scale up to mature, that you need different people. Mm-hmm. And the people who started the journey, which you should be given every chance to go on the journey. But sometimes you've got to change them. And your job as a CEO is to put the best team you can find and can afford on the pitch. So if that means you're going to make tough decisions, you're going to make tough decisions.
Well, Alex was the king of that.
Absolutely.
At the time, you go, what?
Yeah. And so if you remember, in the year after the Champions League in '99, he got rid of a whole lot of stars. And some Sky interviewer saying, why did you get rid of all those guys? And his answer was very simple. The team that got me the treble is not going to get me the next trophy. And I think that just encapsulates what a scaling business should be thinking. In relation to succession, I think he got that all wrong. I think he and how dare I, complain about a man who gave us all.
They all got it wrong, in fairness, because, and I think we also underestimated what he did. He did everything.
Yeah.
And a lot of things happened, I think. I think football was changing a lot at the time. We didn't realize how much it was changing. And then we realized when he was gone, he was director of football. He was chief scout. He was the manager. He was the coach.
Yep.
He was head of talent. He was head of everything.
Yeah.
And you removed half a club. You didn't remove man, you removed half a club. And we're still paying for that today. What, 10 years later? Yeah.
If it had been dealt with differently, we could be in a different situation. Like if David Moyes had been brought on 2 years before he stepped down to be in it, la 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 la.
I read this during the week. They were talking about Moyes, if he'd come on a year earlier, if he'd won the title.
Yeah.
If. Look, Alex got more juice out of that team than I think most people would. He got the last title out of that team.
Yeah.
If Moyes had come on a season earlier, would he have got that title, and would history have changed? Who knows? But probably not, because Alex got the tune.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been a lean 10 years. God, I go over 4 times a year. I'm going over again in a few weeks. I always look forward to it because I always enjoy it.
Sure.
But it's hard going now.
Well, it's very hard. It's very hard to watch. But
the last two have been over is Crystal Palace 3-0, Bournemouth 3-0 at home.
Yeah.
I've Wolves in a few weeks. And I'm like,
Elanga scoring last Monday night, I
was kind of happy for him. He seems like a nice guy.
How did someone make a decision to sell him?
He's a great player.
How did someone make a decision to sell Scott? But anyway.
It's just decision. It's just repetitive mistakes. It shows you how disaster is not one big decision. It's a series of micro bad decisions.
As is success.
I do like Ruben though. He's making the right noises. I think it's going to take a long time though.
You had Colm Line in here, and I sit now on Colm's board.
Oh yes,
and
great guy, not really nice
great guy. And Colm asked me, what was the one thing you do to scale a business? And I said, there isn't one thing. There's hundreds of things. that you do. And you got to do a little bit about it every day. It's, and it goes back to having that right team. Is your team up for scaling? Is it an enterprise team? And all of those things are things that a growing business has to deal with. If they don't deal with those things, in my humble view, they don't grow.
It takes courage and belief in yourself and your business idea to take the step to set up your own business. In the early stages, entrepreneurship can be a lonely road, even through milestone moments. Deciding to commit the idea you've been mulling over, learning, growing and developing your skills, building a team to help you along the way, and preparing to launch into new markets. Enterprise Ireland is there for all of those startup moments. From providing advice and guidance to new founders through our startup network, to pre-seed funding and early investment, we're here to help you bring your ambition to fruition. To find out how Enterprise Ireland can help you on your startup journey, visit enterprise-ireland.com.
Before we dive into today's episode, I want to share a game changer for your business, Azure Communications. When it comes to print and marketing solutions, these folks, led by CEO Jenny Johnston, are the real deal. Whether you need an eye-catching brochure, sleek business cards, or a full-blown digital campaign, Azure Communications has you covered. They're not just about high-quality prints or digital campaigns, they're also about delivering great results. And here's the best part. Just for listeners of the Entrepreneur Experiment, you can get 20% off your first order. Just give them a call or go online and use the code VOX20. With personalized service and fast turnaround times, Azure Communications will help you make the impact your business deserves. Trust me, when it comes to making your brand stand out, Azure Communications is the provider of choice. Check them out at azurecom.ie, use code VOX20 and elevate your marketing game today.
Nostra, an Irish IT company, offers world-class managed IT services, cloud solutions, IT support, and more, all tailored to meet your business needs. So, whether you're streamlining operations or boosting productivity, their expert team is ready to help you. Visit nostra.ie or email info@nostra.ie to see how they can help solve your IT challenges today.
How did you and Tim, think about this, think about scaling? Did you always want to run a big business? Back then in the shed, where you're like, someday this is going to be X, or were you kind of just evolutionary?
So the answer to that question is yes. Okay, it's a bit of both. So was there a master plan that 30 years later that this will be a 750 person business and 230 or 40 million turnover? No. There was a very detailed plan for the next 3 years. Call it Base Camp 1. Okay, what we need to do to get to Base Camp 1, and from pretty much day one, we were behaving like around budgeting and forecasting and planning like a big business or a bigger business, and that was. It turns out that was a really good thing to be doing, even though as a CEO of a very small business at the time, you were spending most of your time, if not all of your time, working in the business. But every now and again, we just lift our head and say we need to work on the business. And as the business evolved, we did more and more of that. So we knew what Base Camp 1 looked like. We knew once we got to coming up to Base Camp 1, we had to design, Base Camp 2. I'm not sure what base camp we're on now, but it's a bloody high mountain.
I think you're on the second mountain. Yeah. Talk to me about that, because I love that. I love learning how people think. Talk to me about Base Camp 1. Like, was that a number? Was that a metric? What was that?
So it was. It always has to be a number in my view, okay? Because that's just a significant metric that every business has. It needs a certain amount of income to pay its way in life. And, we didn't have buckets of money. In fact, the seed capital for this business was 10,000 punts from Tim and 10,000 punts from John. And I was talking to Mark Murphy, the CEO of Fenergo, the other night, and they had Ergo had finished its year end. They had just finished their year end. Both the businesses doing extremely well. And I told them, I said, there was 20,000 punts was the seed capital. the business has never had any external capital since. It has, so we don't have any external shareholders. I have 70% and the senior team own 30% between them. When we were spinning out Fenergo, and we should talk about that in a moment, we did have to raise capital. Okay, and you couldn't grow a business, a product business, without having external money, and that was the right thing to do. But we've grown a €250 million business. We've funded the early stages of Fenergo, and we funded another company which is called Flowforma, which has gone through a rough period, but is now coming out of that. So that drives a certain type of activity, a certain type of thought process. We're spending our money, we're not making money for somebody else. Okay, and as you would imagine, we've had all the conversations from all the PEs and the VCs, and they all say, we think you guys are great. They say this to everybody, and we love what you're doing, and all we want to do is give you money, and nothing else changes. And that's horseshit. Okay, once someone writes a check, everything changes. Okay, so let's be careful what we wish for here.
I love that. Like, it's such logic. But the amount of times people have said to me here, like, "Oh yeah, we took on this money, and then it just all went south from there." But the story is all the time.
In the work I'm doing with startups and scale-ups, I have to keep reminding CEOs that their job is not to raise money, and they always seem to be in fundraising mode because they don't raise enough, either because they can't or don't want to, because raising more means they're diluting, and for kind of understanding reasons, I understand that, but if you're on that journey of raising money, you're going to dilute, and hopefully at the end it all comes good. But we never went down that road, and sometimes we question ourselves: could we grow faster? And possibly we could, but I'm not sure we'd be in the position of strength that we're in today if we had gone down that road.
Well, I think there's very few companies in Ireland that are doing $250 million and are owned majority by the person and the staff. Like, that's some achievement. I think that's far more to be celebrated than someone going off and raising 50 million and going, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that.
Yeah. Like, there's so many thoughts going through my head at the moment, Gary, so I often think humility is short with entrepreneurs, and you've heard them saying, and there was quite a famous one in Cork over the last couple of years that said they were going to be not just a unicorn, but what was the next one they were going to be?
A decacorn.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's built on sand. You've met a lot of entrepreneurs over the years who are quite convinced they can turn water into wine. I've never seen it happen. If you're fortunate enough to be able to run one business, you're very fortunate.
That's the thing. And look, there's an element of, you have to be a bit delusional to run a business, because you're doing something that's never been done before. You're creating something out of your brain, into your heart, into your hands, and you're creating something out of thin air. It's the most magical thing you can do in the world, I believe. But it's a fine line.
Yeah. Genius
and madness are just the same coin flipped over.
On the same day.
And like you meet these people and you're like, I'm a fairly good judge of character at this stage, 450 episodes deep, but sometimes someone will ask me, how'd it go? I'm like, I'm not sure if so-and-so's a genius or an absolute head the ball. Because sometimes it literally is. It can go either way. If it works, you're a contrarian genius. If you're not, but it's mainly people who just turn up, work hard, do well. They're the people I love talking to. It's like they turn up, work hard, year after year, like yourself, year after year, turn up, work hard. These are the secrets. That's it. Because the other stuff is fluff and gets all the attention. I'm like, especially when I talk to students, I'm like, ignore the 5%, focus on the 95%. because they're the people you want to be like, and they're the people you're most likely going to be like if you do what they do. Don't try replicate the Elons of the world, because that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But there's 95% of people you can listen from. Yeah. So what was the evolution then from 2 to kind of like Basecamp 1 to the next one to the next one? Like, I'm curious. That stage is always the bit I'm really curious about, because a lot of people listening are in the early stages of businesses and building it out, and they're kind of like the messy middle. I had 2 great entrepreneurs on yesterday, Charlene and Eve from Ella and Joe, and they were talking about being in the messy middle. So many businesses are there. So how did you kind of get over the messy middle part?
It's a slog. It's a whether we like it or not, it's a 7-day-a-week slog, and you've got to be prepared for that. I think creating resilience within yourself is really important, so that you can drive through that, because you're going to fall into potholes all over the place, and you're going to be able to climb out of those potholes. And, that goes back to something that I talk to people about, in terms of picking their co-founders or the founding team. You've got to do a huge amount of, I believe, diligence on who your founding partners are, the same amount as you would do in your life partner. And I see a number of examples where 12 months in, a founder is saying, I really wasn't expecting that from my co-founder. He or she is not putting in the same energy. So we've got a misalignment here. Maybe we've also got a misalignment around ambition or EQ, all of those things. So you've really got to understand who's going to be in the ditch with you, and can you get out of that ditch?
How do you do that though, John, from your experience? Because this is a story I've heard, and often I hear it off mic. We'll be chatting away and do the episode, wrap it up, and they're like, now what I couldn't say about your man or your one is this.
Yeah.
And you're like, oof, that sounds traumatic. And they're having this massive co-founder split. I've heard it a lot.
Yeah.
And it's more common than it isn't, unfortunately. So
Absolutely.
how can founders listening, number one, vet people they should work with? And number two, create structures like you had, whereby, look, it's all very transparent.
Well, I think you've got to work on it, like any relationship. You've got to work on your relationship with your life partner, and you maybe take it. You drink a lot of coffee before you put a piece of ink on paper to decide to do something, and you get to know that individual, and you test that individual, and they test you, to see if there's a level of compatibility here. And I don't mean that we both have to think in the same way. I'm thinking that, we're both generally pointing in the same direction, that our values are somewhat similar. And even at that, it's a risk in the same way as I'm next month, we're married 37 years.
It's important you got that one right now. That was going to be important. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's an incredible achievement.
In fact, we were married on the 14th of May, 1988. It was a super day, because that was the day that Liverpool were beaten by Wimbledon in the FA Cup final.
You always got to find these like tricks to remember things. That's a good one. I like that one.
Laurie Sanchez scored a goal. John Aldridge missed a penalty. But all joking aside, I think in my journey, having a life partner that was prepared to go on this journey, was prepared to give up the holidays and not have the nice car and all of that kind of thing for quite a long time. It requires that amount of diligence in your business partner as you've done in your life partner.
Why do people skip it so often?
Why
do people skip that stage so often with a co-founder? Like, why do they rush to commit?
It can only be down to lack of understanding or the buzz of thinking you're going to start a company.
Yeah,
and you're always looking at it. This is how it's going to go.
You only see the up.
Yeah. Like, we have done, I think, 5 acquisitions over. First one we did in 2010, and I think one of the things we learned after number 1 and number 2 is that you do the commercial, you do the legal, you talk to their customers, you look at their technology, you look at their proposition. For the first 1 or 2, we didn't look at their culture. And if you're acquiring a business, you need to do due diligence on their culture. Can they mesh together? Without mentioning names, I remember a long time ago, I was in a meeting with a very large insurance company in Dublin, and we were doing a project, and I was going in as the project sponsor. I had been briefed by the team. Everything seemed to be going well. I walk into a room and I'm slaughtered. And what's going on here? And I'm walking out of the room, and the CIO walked to the lift with me, and he said, "Look, I'm really sorry about that." And I said, "What's all that about?" And he said, "We bought this company 20 years ago, and they're still struggling to realize that we bought them."
Oh, Jesus. Right? 20 years.
20 years ago, yeah. And they're names that
Yeah.
Okay. And no doubt some big professional services firm like KPMG got a shed load of money to do the due diligence, but nobody looked at the cultural way that business was run.
Talk to me then about like what you look for, because I think this is really interesting. Like, what do you look for
in an acquisition, or
we're kind of skipping over and back here, but like, because you said something really interesting at the start. I'm actually going to kind of weave my way back there. Like, you work with a lot of founders now.
Yeah.
Just while we're on the kind of searching for people piece, I think this is interesting to kind of stay within it. You say you work with a lot of like founders and startups. That's a big commitment as well on your behalf. So what do you look for in them? Because this is a commitment, right? You're probably looking at like 5 to 10 years here.
Yeah. And
so
it's a time and a financial commitment.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you can only do so many. And you have to pick the right ones, especially when it's someone like you and your time is so bloody valuable that you have to pick well.
Yeah.
So what do you look for in founders to go, yes, these are the green flags that I look for within them? And similarly, what sends up a red flag where you're like, not in a million years, I don't care how good the product is?
Like this is incredibly topical at the moment in 1 or 2 companies that I'm working with. And, everybody will look to hire A players, okay? But, they can afford to hire A players, okay? If they're hiring C players who have the capacity to get to B player, they're doing bloody good, okay? Because maybe those people will take a lower salary and the option of some ESOP or similar on as the business grows. So you might have to pepper it with 1 or 2 A players, and they would probably be your founders. And then you've got to build a batch of C plus, maybe B players. So I think that's really important. And I say to founders, you're not going to be able to afford a complete management team of A players. You're just not going to be able to do it. It's going to cost you a lot of cash, and you're going to have to give away a lot of ESOP.
Thank you. The amount of times some people have given me that advice, I was going to say the word bullshit advice, and it's like, only hire A players. And you're like, come on. Like, that's such an obvious thing, and it's completely not realistic. You're the first person, I think, to sit there and go, look, that's not realistic, because A, they're not walking around on the street. If they are, they're getting paid a huge ton of money. A players know they're A players. That's the thing. People are like, oh, I can blah, blah, blah. Or they're doing their own thing. So you're the first person to actually sit there and go, look, here's the reality.
And it is the reality. I also think as a leader that you have a responsibility to grow people. And that takes a lot of time. And if you're just bringing in, whether it's a startup or a mature business, if you're just bringing in the A players from outside, there's a cultural problem there. Because what you're saying to the people down here who are in the B or C, well, actually, you're not good enough. Where really, as a leader, what I should be doing is putting some of those people on some sort of an accelerated program that can get them up to a B plus or similar.
Give them the chance at least to become that.
Exactly.
Don't just like keep dropping them. It's a sign of poor management.
And each year, about 15, every 2 years in Ergo, about 15 mid-level people are put on a program that we have run with UCC around leadership development and what they need to do, what they need to learn to be in a position to have a conversation about a more senior role. And that's given us really good results. And we're growing our own talent. So, that's how we can compete. That's how, we can compete in the marketplace for good people, because we can take people in at a younger level or a lower level, and we can bring them up through the system. Like one of the things that I'm incredibly proud of is, when I see people joining our support desk, maybe straight out of college, or not even going to college, and they're 22, and they are a level 1 engineer, and now they're running practices for us. And the biggest practice that Ergo has, which is called a modern workplace practice, is run by a guy called Sean. And I remember the day that Sean walked in the door as a 22-year-old, and how he's running the biggest team. Still only 30 odd, but phenomenal guy. And there's names going through my head of people who have come from TUD in Tala, in DCU, in the National College of Ireland, who have a work ethic, smart people, not always from, if I may, and I've no right to say this, but from the affluent part of town, but people who are honest and have a work ethic, and those people will go through a wall for you, and those people know that our leadership team will go through a wall for them.
And then in terms of founders you look at, that you're either going to invest in or you're going to work on as a director, what are the characteristics that make you invest or make you say, yes, I will become your director?
So, Gary, I don't think it's one thing. I think it's a learning, evolving thing over time, if you have that time.
When you meet them, first couple of coffees, gut is telling you what? Like what's kind of going, that's, they're saying the right things, or they're displaying the right behaviors.
EQ.
What's EQ?
So emotional intelligence, that they understand what empathy is. They are comfortable with taking a team and growing that team into something bigger, and they realize that their value to the organization is not necessarily what they do, is what they're getting other people to do and how they teach other people. So, they're not keeping all the skill close to their chest.
They're not gatekeeping.
Yeah, exactly. People, I used the expression earlier, people who will get into a ditch with you and help you dig your way out of that ditch. There's I know there's people on the teams that I've worked with over the years would have literally gone through a wall for me because they knew that I was going to go through a wall for them. And like, there's tons of examples. There was an example quite a number of years ago where I got a phone call on a Saturday morning from our then CFO, and he'd had a phone call from somebody, and this guy's family home has been fired the night before, and there was no insurance, and everything in the house was destroyed. Bedding, furniture, clothes, etc. So I have a sister who runs a logistics business, and I asked her for lend of a van, and myself and our CFO with a company credit card went up to Harvey Norman's, and we bought beds, and we bought a cooker and a fridge, and we bought a couch, and the council had given them temporary accommodation, but there was no furniture in it, and we furnished it. Nobody knew about that other than myself, the CFO, and the lad whose family had lost their home. So would he go through a wall? Excuse me, for me, bloody sure he would. I've said to young parents, I want you to go to your daughter's nativity play. I want you to go to your son's soccer match or whatever it is. I want you to make sure your work is done and no customer is left in a position, but I want you to go to that. Equally, and I will not abuse this, but I want to call you at 8 o'clock at night if I really need you, and I expect you to take the call. And that's a given.
But I think that's so refreshing. Like, common sense is not that common. We live in a world where everyone's trying to have all these rules, and either people are taking the piss one way or the other, or going too far this way or that way. Like, that's just common sense. I used to say the same thing to two people that worked for me. I was like, look, when your work's done, your work's done. Don't sit there. Go home. If you're going to the doctor, don't tell me you're going to the doctor. Just go. Go to the dentist. Just go. I said, my thing was, as long as my phone doesn't ring.
Yeah.
I said, as long as there's not a customer ringing me going, hey, client outside, what's the crack?
Yeah.
I said, we're good. I said, I trust you. I said, we're working together long enough now. Just you do your thing. And they literally did stuff for me that just was so far above and beyond. And we're still best friends today because of it.
Sure.
And it's having that trust. But that comes down to hiring the right people. It goes back to treating people with respect and dignity and playing the long game with people. Absolutely. And kind of going, right, we're in this together. Let's build something that's beyond just a job.
See, I think, Gary, people confuse leadership with management.
I like this. Go on.
So, in a very simple example, if we were watching Ireland playing rugby, the leader, coach, is sitting up in the stand with a microphone and a laptop, and he's talking to the manager who's at grass level, at pitch level, and he's giving him direction on how that person should manage the formation, who should be substituted, etc., etc. So I think we should be looking at this is that we lead people and we manage programs or projects or whatever. Okay, we don't manage people. People do not want to be managed. People want to be led.
It's a great distinction. I don't think anyone's explained it like that to me. And so often people talk about, I have a work person and I have a personal life and I'm different at work than in person. Because I think that's the difference. That's, are you a leader or a manager? Are you micromanaging in often sense. So you talked about there.
And by the way, there's not every leader is leading for the right reasons, but they're still leading. So if I use an example that, Nelson Mandela was an incredible leader. And he led with his conviction. The Wolf of Wall Street was a leader, but he's not going to get that sustained effort over time because he's going to get busted. Trump is a leader.
Yeah.
Would I like to be led by him? No.
Yeah. It's you said something there about spinning out a company.
Yeah.
So what did you spin out? Because you were building Ergo,
yeah,
and it was adding on bits and bits and bits, and you were building out your client base.
Yeah.
At what point did you spin out another company?
So I would love to tell you that was a real strategic plan. It wasn't. It was opportunistic, because you will remember in 2008 the world was falling apart and we were facing into the financial crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And we had quite a big banking practice, which was about 40% of our overall business. And our business was about 25 million at that stage.
Your clients were banks, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and out of that 40%, our biggest client by a long measure was Bank of Scotland. And we could not build technology fast enough So we were building lending platforms for the subprime lenders. I think there was 7. We had 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which probably in 2006 was like unbelievably, I can't believe we got this contract.
Yeah. Give me a platform. I need a platform.
Wow.
And the Bank of Scotland thing was a phenomenal roller coaster. And I remember I was in an airport in California. I had just finished my last day in Leadership for Growth in Stanford. And Mark Murphy, who was the sales director of the banking practice, now the CEO of Fenergo, who, by the way, is my nephew, he called me and he said, our pipeline is evaporating. So what are you talking about? He said, work that we thought we had coming is stopped. It's not going anywhere. And I said, temporarily? He said, no. So I was flying to Boston. I was meeting my family who had flown into Boston, and we were going to spend a holiday in Cape Cod. And for the 13 days that we're in Cape Cod, I was on the phone at 8 a.m. every morning for 2 hours talking to the team back in Dublin. And the CFO was cut. And I, let's cut a little, but let's slow it down here. We built a great team. They're very talented. Do we want to just disband it straight away? And we were scrapping for business, really, really scrapping for business. And we got a bit of business from NAMA. There was a certain bank, you will remember, that didn't have a lot of computerization, and there was spreadsheets and drawers and all that kind of stuff.
Where's the money, lads? We need to find it.
We went in and tried to put some structure on that.
Okay.
And then we started realizing that we're not going to be building lending platforms, but that banks had a different requirement. And there was a huge amount of compliance being put, regulation being put on banks, such as MiFID out of the US and Sarbanes-Oxley and BAL and all those kind of things. And every time we heard there was BAL 1, 2, or 3 or MiFID 1, 2, we were punching the air. Because what that meant was that if you were sitting on the board of a bank and you weren't ensuring that you could get your money back, essentially, and that you had governance and rigor around stuff, you were going to prison.
So you knew digitization was going to have to be applied here. Okay.
So we put a huge amount of effort in taking some of the code that we'd built in our lending platforms into our collecting platforms.
Okay, so you just switched the model. You switched it around.
Look, that sounds incredibly simple.
You have to simplify it. I'm sure it was years. I'm sure it was a long time, and it was iterative and stuff like that. But in simple terms.
But so we went and we showed this very rudimentary platform to NAMA, and they said that's interesting, and they brought us in 3 times and show us that again. Yeah, that's interesting. And then they came out with an RFP.
What's an RFP?
Sorry, for a tender. A request for pricing, okay? And we responded, and we got down to the last 2. If I remember correctly, it was us or a New York-based company called Fidelity something. And we won it as our first customer. And it was huge. It's up to this year. It'll finish this year because NAMA will no longer exist after this year.
So was this a product you built?
So we had taken the bones of what we had in our lending. If you'd taken some of the pieces out of that and cobbled them together with some new pieces, and here's a platform that allows a bank collect the money that it's owed, or to governance the money that they've lent and trying to get back, etc.
Right. Was this your first product?
Yeah.
So you'd kind of, before that, you were always services based.
Yeah.
You're always like,
Yeah.
they'd ask you to do something, you'd build it off, they go and use it. Okay. So this is the first thing you built yourselves. This is our thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we...
This was what, 2009, 10?
yeah, 2009, definitely.
Okay.
So, Mark in particular start showing it around town, and in the UK, and even went to Australia at the time, and went to US, and, find a second customer is always going to be difficult. And second customer ended up being Investec in London. Separately, we were talking to Investec in Dublin, not about selling the product, but about taking a stake in the business. And a great guy, now retired, a guy called Michael Murphy, sat in our boardroom and he said, I want to invest in this, but not in the format that it's in. What does that mean? He said, well, so this product business is joined with a services business. And he was completely right. They're two different models. They're two different motions. He said, so for me to give you money, you're going to have to take this product business and put it into a separate structure with a separate CEO, separate CFO, and so on. So that was a great idea. So we did that. And he gave us, I think, 5 million on a valuation of 20 million. We had 2 customers. And we started to make some really big traction. And by...
So this was Fenergo.
This is Fenergo.
You didn't stray too far from the name. I like it. You didn't stray too far from the name. You didn't. There's no marketing firm hired to come up with a sexy new name.
Not a cent.
What do we call it? Let's just put an F.
I think somebody was looking up. I could be completely wrong here, but was looking up some. What's the Italian for? Or and I think Fenergo and lending has some relationship. I could be completely wrong on that, but that's there's some residual in the back of my head. And so we win clients, and in 2015 we needed to raise more money. So you'd spun it out. Ergo was over here, Fenergo is over here now. Yeah. 2 separate teams. You'd raised money for this one, so this was different. You were going to do this differently. Why did you raise money? Because we needed money to build the engineering and marketing and build out the sales organization, the whole thing.
Right. Okay.
And we had this bizarre situation for about 18 months where Ergo and Fenergo were in the same building. Okay. And we no desks, so people had to double desks. Okay, like in school.
You really did keep things lean, didn't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And until we could afford to lease another building, that's what Fenergo did. And so around 2015, we needed more money. We hire a corporate finance firm out of London, and Insight Ventures from New York came in and took a stake in the business at a valuation of 85 million.
Oh.
And
it's a big jump.
Big jump. And the first time that I and we got a payday.
Good. Okay.
It's really interesting, and I can talk about Fenergo when I'm all night here, but it's really interesting. So we had come through the financial crisis when turnover was 25 million, and it dropped to 15 million. Around that time, we were building out a data center for Skype in North Dublin, and one of our guys would go over to Slovenia once a quarter. And he spent 2 days with the people in Slovenia, and procurement and technology, go to dinner, and he'd come back with a massive big order. Turn on the radio one morning, and Microsoft bought Skype over. Okay?
Oh, to choose their own data centers.
Yeah. And like that was like 3 or 4 million gone.
Whoa.
We done nothing wrong. Okay. So we were, at that stage, we were a 12, 13 million euro business.
Oof, that's a huge chunk.
So we have the payday out of Fenergo, and my appetite or our appetite for risk changed enormously. And I remembered the back of my mind, there was a guy came into lecturers in Stanford, and he had a shareholding in about 100 companies, okay, including JetBlue, the airline. And his advice was, now think about this as America, and we're in Ireland, so the banking systems are different. But his advice was, get a business to a certain size, and then take money off the table, deal with the house, deal with your private debt, your pension, and then go like muck. Okay.
Okay.
And that's exactly what happened.
That's interesting. I thought you were going to say you got conservative because you're like, oh, I have it now, I don't want to lose it.
No. So for the first time in a long number of years, I wasn't worried about whether, if this all went pear-shaped, could I feed my kids? You know, could I pay my mortgage? All that kind of stuff.
Okay.
All that's done. And we're not going to be reckless.
So you raised money, sold a bit of your shares to new investors.
Yes.
Okay. So that's how the money comes in. I think that's always interesting. People go, oh, how do they make money, or how do they like look after themselves? So when a new investor came in, you were valued at this, you sold some private shares, and you were able to get some money off the table. Okay.
So that put not only Fenergo on a journey, it created a new journey for Ergo. You know, and I said to you earlier that, you know, I've worked in 4 or 5 different companies under the Ergo.
It's all starting to make sense to me now.
Yeah, because they're incredibly different.
Yeah.
You know, you're dealing with different opportunities, challenges, etc.
But how did you do that though? Because I think it's a Russian proverb: "The man who chases 2 rabbits catches none."
Yeah.
How did you balance off Fenergo and Ergo?
So I became Ergo's non-exec director on the Fenergo board until Insight came in. So the only involvement at that stage from Ergo was I went to a board meeting every 2 months or something. Okay, but they were running the business.
Okay,
you know, John was no longer the CEO of that business. In fact, he was the CEO of the collective business until it split.
Mm-hmm.
So it also meant, for the first time in probably 5 years, that my attention was solely on Ergo. But it also meant, you know, for 5 years, we weren't investing in Ergo because how much money did Ergo make last month? Give it to them.
Right.
You know.
So did the business suffer?
So it, yeah, I think it plateaued for a while, but I think, you know, post 2015, when, you know, the rocket fuel went in, it then started to take off. Like it did an acquisition in 2015, in 2016, it did. Then next one it did was in 20 and then 21. I think, or something similar to that. So that set of circumstances drove a lot of momentum in 2 different directions.
Right.
You know?
That's often tricky. It's very rarely works out and very rarely advised. I'm sure you'd advise your founders not to get split distraction. So you were able to hive this off, new team over there, able to take your focus back on Ergo.
Yeah.
Were you ever tempted to go off with Fenergo yourself?
No. So you know, I didn't have the expertise to run a product company in fintech. Mark learned very, very quickly and is making a super job of it. So it was always going to be Mark, and I was always going to do Ergo, and that was never even a discussion.
And where did Fenergo go? What was the outcome?
So Fenergo went on a journey, and the last fundraising that Fenergo did was in September 21, and that Insight were brought out, and Bridgepoint came in, and that came in on a valuation of 1.21 billion. When I say that again,
Please do. For the people not listening at home or driving their cars going, wait, what?
1.21 billion. Now, I always have to say this, like everybody else, I was diluting, so I wasn't getting 20% of 1.21 billion, but I'm not unhappy. And they're
I'm not unhappy.
and Mark and his team is now shooting for a 2.53 billion number, and let's see how that goes.
So did you leave the business at that point?
So I when Insight came in, I was no longer a non-exec. I was a shareholder, and I'm still a tiny shareholder.
Okay. You got a little bit more money off the table when Fenergo went out.
Yeah.
Class.
Yeah.
Love
So
that.
yeah. And I'm hoping to get a third one. So let's see how that rolls.
That's the gift that keeps giving, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But that's I think I started in the first 2 minutes of this, said the evolution. Like it's fascinating to just peel these layers and just kind of like, again, it debunks the big myths. I love debunking myths here. It debunks the big myth of the aha moment.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just sitting in my car and I just had this idea. No, you didn't, John. Your PR company told you to say that because it's a boring story. It's just, this is what it is. It's just grinding and reps.
I wonder, when retrospectively people talk about executing on their strategy, when did they decide on that strategy? Was it after it was achieved? Was it just before it was achieved? I don't think it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I just don't think so. Maybe in a limited number of cases. But I think what you've got to do is build a high-performing culture, a growth mindset, never accepting that we're not growing, never accepting that we're not always in the change mode.
You mentioned something there. You were doing a program with EI, Leadership for Growth.
Yeah.
What is that?
So the first one happened in 2006, 2007. And Frank Ryan, who was the CEO of Enterprise Ireland, along with a number of others, and there was Tony from System Dynamics, and there was Bernie Cullinan, were advising Frank on building a educational environment for entrepreneurs. So initially it was with Stanford University. It has since gone to Switzerland, and I think currently it's in Spain and Madrid. Other than a year within COVID, it has ran every year. So one Sunday afternoon in October 2008, I walk into a lecture hall in Stanford. So remember, I had never been to full-time college. So it's incredibly daunting. And I look around.
Daunting, really?
Yeah.
After all you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. So how old were we then? We were 13 years old, okay? So I'm looking around and I'm seeing people from the Irish ecosystem that were, doing enormous things. We're real big entrepreneurs and personalities and so on. And within a couple of weeks, we figured out that we were only one of 2 companies that were bootstrapped. 28 other companies were spending other people's money. We were only
That's
2.
much lower than I thought.
Sorry?
That's much lower than I thought.
Yeah.
I thought more would be bootstrapped.
So there was only 2 of us, the same 2, ironically, who were making money. Okay?
What a weird coincidence.
Yeah. So it was a phenomenal time. And
What did it involve?
so you arrive in on a Sunday afternoon after getting off an airplane, probably the Friday evening. You're working really long days and nights, and you're exposed to the best in class business lecturers and visiting people, visiting businesses, etc., talking about scaling. So by the time that we left there in July 2008, we now had a toolkit on how to scale a business.
Right.
We had the ambition that we could do it from this little island. At the time, that program was costing 100,000 euros. Enterprise Ireland, or the Irish government, was paying 90,000, and Frank Ryan was being kicked around the place by journalists and certain sides of government, etc., saying that this is a horrible waste of taxpayers' money and it's making fat cats fatter and all that kind of stuff. You do an analysis. So in the year that I was in, there was 2 unicorns, Fenergo and AMCS in Limerick. Okay, and if you look each year, there's phenomenal businesses have gone through that. Name me any business that has had a phenomenal growth in this country, and the chances are it's been there, and it's still running today. In fact, last Wednesday week, I was at an alumni dinner where there was about 150, 200 people who had gone through the program, were coming back, and so on.
Amazing. And the peer network you're building from that.
Oh,
That's one of my pet peeves, is like people go on about what's spent on, in entrepreneurs and founders and stuff. But when you look at the FDI, how much money is thrown at companies to come to Ireland and blah, blah, blah. And then the drop of the hat that could go. And you're like, spend more money on the founders.
Yeah.
Like, invest in the people we have. We already have them here. Don't always be looking abroad going, wouldn't it be great if we had so-and-so? Jobs. Yeah, all that's balance. You need balance. You need to support the people who are building here.
But
I will stay here.
There is research has been done on the ROI. I can't remember the numbers, so I'm not going to quote them, but it's quite phenomenal. It's quite phenomenal that you have even people who've built a business, has sold the business, and now have gone again or are reinvesting that money because entrepreneurship, as you know, Gary, it's a drug.
They're addicts. It is an addiction,
and it's really hard to come off it.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing now is because I don't want to come off it.
You're on your methadone. You're stepping down by just by investing, and just it's mad. Like, because people always ask me, like, what are the things, and I'm like, they're all kind of addicts, really. Like, they're just addicted to the game, which is a good thing, really, because like you need. So I was in UL last week, and then I was in UCD, and people were asking me like, what's different now between now and kind of say, 10, 15 years ago. And I was like, well, now we have far more people who you can look at and go, see that? That's what they did. See that? That's what they did. Even in 10, 15 years, you have the Fenergos, you have the Cubics, you have the people like that. And you have all this batch of people who are now, they've gone, they might have gone again, but now they're investing. And like, that creates, you talked there about the 150, 125 people that came to that peer network. The value in that. Oh my God. Like, we're only getting, it's only start, really, of building up the ecosystem. That word's thrown around far too much.
And you have to applaud the work that EI are doing. You go to any other country in Europe and you talk about this, and people look at you, really? Is this really happening?
Yeah. And they get beaten around the bush, and everyone likes to take pot shots at the Leos and the EIs of the world. But when you step back and look at what they're doing, they're creating this environment. And I'm a big believer in that. Create the environment, let the builders build.
So remember, EI are the biggest investor in companies in Europe. Bigger than any PE, bigger than any VC. And it's a absolute differentiator. Absolute differentiator.
Very few countries in the world that rival Ireland for starting a business. Yes, we're small. But like you said, once you get off the island, so how did you do that? When you came back, were you already abroad, or how did you scale out? Because that's the, it's like the magician. And for my next trick, I'm going to go abroad.
It's a bit like the advice I gave column 9. You've got to do something about it every day. You've got to develop a growth mindset. You've got to start having a belief that you can go off the island. You've got to do it, obviously, in a planned way. You've got to have the team to do it, the bandwidth to do it, the working capital to do it. But it clearly, it can be done. It can be done either in a bootstrap company, or it can be done in a eventual-led company. And you go to Dublin Airport any Monday morning, and you walk either down to the Ryanair gates or the Aer Lingus gates, and you see Ireland Inc. in action. And we're a small island. We've got to get off this island in order for us to grow. Because I think the people who are running those kind of companies are certainly not mom and pop, and are certainly not lifestyle. Quite the opposite. In fact, in my experience, entrepreneurs put their lifestyle on ice for quite some time before they can go back to that lifestyle. But it's a phenomenal differentiator.
Talk to me then about what you do now, because you talked about, like, you're the chairman and then you're a director.
Yeah.
What does someone do that sits on a board? Because this is always the kind of bits that I like, because you're reading the back of the Sunday Times on a Sunday. Oh, so and so joined the board of whatever.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So, as I said earlier, Gary, there's you kind of learn stuff over 30 years. Okay. Hopefully, you help people avoid the pitfalls that you've fallen into, or you help them build resilience. So if they do find a pitfall and fall into it, they can get out of it. You can help them get out of it. I think in all of those companies, we're using shareholders' money to grow business. So as a chair or as a non-exec, I've got a responsibility to make sure that money is spent in the best possible way and can yield for all the stakeholders and the shareholders. I think what you can do is you can test the founders on their strategy, on their leadership style, on how they're approaching things. Are they really working on the things that they should be working on? And should they be working in the markets that they are working in? Are they being ambitious enough? Are they being too ambitious? So there's an awful lot of things that a chair or a non-exec needs to do.
What's the difference between the two? What does the chair do that a non-exec doesn't?
So you might have one or two non-execs, and one of them is the chair, just to put structure on it. Like it's in 30 odd years of sitting on boards, I've never sat in where there was a vote. I nearly did recently.
So it's not like Billions or Wolf of Wall Street or any of those business movies. It's not like that.
No, like if you're,
I moved to oust him.
Yeah, if you're down to a vote, you've got a problem. You've got a problem. So it goes back to a conversation we had earlier in this discussion, which was that in the early stages of Ergo, we had structures to allow us perform in a governance way, that we were working as a much bigger company than we actually were. And I think that's important. It's an opportunity to take the execs and the founders out of the business for a couple of hours and talk to them about what's working on the business.
So you acted like a big business before you were one.
Yeah.
And then when you became one, it wasn't a huge culture shock. And so that's what you're trying to pass back now, is it?
Absolutely. So in the last 3 or 4 months, as chair, I've had 3 companies on offsites for a day or two, talking about strategy, talking about Basecamp 1. And I remember one CEO saying, "We don't have time for that."
Oh, Jesus.
And I said, "Exactly."
Oh, God.
Exactly.
That's a red flag.
That's the reason why you need to do it.
Yeah.
Because there's no time.
I don't have time to invest in myself. I'm like, oh, Christ.
Yeah.
You're on a road to ruin,
Absolutely.
either physically, mentally, as a business, whatever it is. It just shows you don't have your shit together. If you don't have control.
Yeah.
It's like complaining. If you're complaining about stuff, just shows everyone you don't know what you're doing. You don't have control of what you're doing. What do you pick to get involved in? What do you pick? How do you pick to get involved in? 'Cause I'm sure you get pitched all the time. You're going to get pitched after this.
It's about the founder.
Yeah.
Because even if the proposition is wrong, the right founder will figure out what they need to do. They'll figure out how to pivot. They'll figure out that the path they're on at the moment is not going to yield. So we better get on to a new path. Okay, that's number one. Number two, have the ambition. Because the only way that I can get my money back and some is if this company is scaled and someone's going to pay 3x, 4x, 5x, whatever. That's the only way that I'm going to get my money back. So, have they got that ambition? I was chairing a company which we have since sold. We sold it way too early. The reason why we sold it way too early was because two founders, even though they had said one of them would go and live in the US where 95% of their market was, they wouldn't go. So I said, well, I'm not going to stand in front of shareholders and ask them for more money because we're not living up to our promise. So we sold a business, we got some money out of it, learned a lesson and move on.
What was the lesson?
The lesson is that unless people are saying, yeah, we want to be scaled, but that conversation now has to extend to, so you've had a conversation with your wife or with your husband, and you're going to pack up your bags and you're going to put take your kids out of school and put them in a school in Boston or whatever. Do we have an agreement on that? Because if not, we're not scaling. And the answer sometimes is, well, we'll hire someone over there. Doesn't work. Or it works in very few times. This idea of bouncing back and forward every couple of weeks into the US or into any other geography for that matter, you've got to be in the market. You've got to understand the market. Who are the players? You've got to be networking and socializing and all that stuff.
There's a lot more to it.
Absolutely.
Padraig O'Cady was on the pod a few weeks ago and he said
Great
something brilliant.
Yeah.
He's such a gent. And we're having a coffee and he was saying about his daily routine and he was, I'd be up at 4, be at the airport at 4:30, be on a flight to Dublin at 5, be in my office in Dublin at 6:30 a.m. I'd leave at 6 p.m, fly back to Galway. I was like, why'd you not just have an office in Galway? He's like, you have to smell the aviation fuel, Gary. You have to be in it. And I was like, that's a beautiful analogy of just, I need to be able to smell it. Because instantly I was like, I got it then. Yeah. You need to be around it, you need to be in it. Because he's like, there's so much that goes into it. Stuff you miss by just not being there. Yeah. It's like, okay, I think there's a huge lesson there for every founder, like being immersed in it. Is it all tech or is there other stuff that kind of lights you up now?
So most of it has a tech element to it. Okay, so a great company called Dimply, which is providing financial institutions with a platform they can give customers a personalized view of their money and their investments. Really, a lot of high hope for that business, run by a super CEO called Jack Dunn, a lady called Jack Dunn. Beyond BMI, which is a medically driven business supported by tech, which is dealing with obesity in a digital way. Like I said, the reality is that in the public system in Ireland, there is 9 months waiting time for an obesity clinic, and sorry, that's in the private. In the public, it's 3.5 years.
Oh my God.
And what Dr. Harriet is doing with her team is quite phenomenal.
I had a chat with her a couple of years ago, actually, during COVID. We connected. They're based out of DCU, or were based out of DCU?
They were based in,
one of the ex-lecturers I know.
Yeah.
They connected me and they asked me to chat to them.
So that business now has 6 months ago it went EBITDA positive. It's got cash in the bank. We're trying to build the next layer. The next layer looks like it could be a B2B. I work with a company called Endeavor, and they have IoT applets that are going into Ford, General Motors, Jaguar, other car manufacturers to so the manufacturer can get continuous telemetry back to a base, so they can see how long a set of tires are lasting or brake pads are lasting, etc.
Oh, cool. Yeah, makes sense.
I think that's it. They've developed a new vertical, which I think is fantastic. So you're sitting in on an airplane, you're flying to the US, and you're looking at the in-flight entertainment. When that's being changed, that's a big ordeal. It's done through a server that sits on the airplane. So with our applets, that can now be done in a fraction of the time.
Oh, wow.
Through satellite. And they've just signed Panasonic Aviation as the first customer, which has 80 airlines around the world.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah. That kind of thing.
So what's on the horizon for the rest of the year for you? What are you getting excited about now for 2025? We're going to do our quick fire round now in a second, but what's your big thing that you're thinking about for 2025?
Well, it's very hard to have a conversation with anyone and not talk about AI. And AI is going to change the world. Like, the reality is AI has been here since 1950. If we go up the road here to St. James's Hospital and we walk into an operating theatre, there's robots there that have been performing operations using artificial intelligence. So, very typical in the technology world, it's now becoming mainstream. So, it's certainly going to change the world. It's changing the world. Will it create less demand for a human? I'm not sure. I think there will be a hybrid of some description. So I'm having a lot of conversations with founders, with boards, about making sure their products are enabled, so that we can ride that wave. And whether if you don't have it, you're just out. You're just excluded, okay? And it's going to become a hygiene factor. In normal companies, it's getting them into a phase that they're no longer startup and they start scaling up. Okay, I said earlier that too many CEOs are always fundraising. They should be executing, so it's pushing them in that direction. So I think it's more of the same. I think it's more of the same. Is really what.
You bullish?
Yes, by nature I am. Will some fail? Yes, but I can see some significant wins in there as well.
Talk to me about clarity of thought just before we kind of move on, because how do you summarize the ethos, the gist of a business? Because I talk to a lot of people and they can't quite, can't properly put a definition on what it is they do. Whereas you showed me something just before we started, and it was something you'd written after being asked to kind of like summarize what you do. Like, can you share that kind of process with me and how you kind of thought about that?
So that particular situation happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was sitting watching soccer, and I get an email from a colleague in Ergo called Gene O'Doherty, and Gene was in the middle or coming to the end of doing an MBA or similar. And the question was, as part of some sort of an exercise they had to do, they needed to explore with the CEO what the culture of Ergo meant to them and in their words. So, not the thing that we're putting on the wall or something that we're putting
the catchy
in a brochure.
Slogan. Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting, and I went for a walk, and 40 minutes later I came back and I opened my laptop. And this is what I wrote. We are gazelles competing against gorillas. We think status quo was a band from the 70s or 80s. We are innovators, disruptors, transformers, and change agents. We are a 25-year-old startup. Change is in our DNA. We hire like-minded people who like to be challenged. We challenge each other and respectively challenge the customer. We are the collective sum of all of our talents. Together, we're at least as strong as our biggest competitor. Competition makes us stronger and faster. We don't take ourselves too serious, but what we do is take our work and we obsess about our team, our proposition, our customers. We use technology to deliver better outcomes for the customers. We are One Ergo.
Was that hard to put together or easy?
So I think what I'd say to you, Gary, is that was obviously somewhere in the recess of my mind, maybe not in a paragraph. And it's something that I do a lot. I like to have a period of time every day, if possible, where I'm on my own. And I might listen to a podcast or I might listen to music, but generally I'm thinking about a opportunity or a challenge or a problem. And quite frequently when I come back off that hour's walk, I've got a better perspective on that issue. And I sometimes think my brain is like a bowl of mushy peas, and that kind of stuff helps me just put it into some level of coordinated way.
Clarity. I write stuff down physically. You can see me making notes here all the time. I find when I do that, it just gives me the clarity. I find my brain is quite busy and quite active and quite distractible. I find when I write it down, it just gives me that clarity, because then it becomes real. It's weird. I write down, someone's asked me today about, like, oh, you make digital notes or physical notes? I was like, both. I make physical notes and then I transfer them to digital and I store them, organize them, all that kind of crack. There's something powerful about writing that down. Thanks for sharing that. Before we get to the quick fire question, what's the crack with United? What's the how do we change this?
Well,
the trickiest question of the day, last.
I think we've got to give the new man time. I think it'll probably take at least 2 summer transfer markets to get where he wants to be. Clearly, the Glazers have had a very bad impact on the club. Look, they're business people. I have no problem with that. But, it would be like, as the majority shareholder in Ergo, that if I was taking all the available working capital out of the business.
Every year.
Yeah.
On repeat.
And we didn't have money to invest. And quite frankly, it's been the opposite. We've never taken a dividend. And because we want to be in control of our destiny. So I think as painful as it is, and even times after watching United over the last couple of seasons, it almost affects my mental health. We're just going to stick with it. It'll come right. Got to believe that.
I do too. Kind of similar enough. Oh God, I agree with you. So at times, we have a young child, so there's been times for, like, there's an 8 o'clock kickoff. I get to half time, 8:45. I was like, text my dad. I was like, I'm going to bed. I'm not watching the rest of that. Yeah. I'm just in a foul mood. Yeah. I'm just in bad form. Because we had it so good for so long as well. I think it'll take a while. I agree with you. I like Ruben. I like the attitude and the culture he's trying to bring. Because I think we've had a very bad attitude and a very bad culture for a very long time. I don't mind if we're not winning, as long as we're losing in the right way, and that is with class, with dignity, with a plan. You look at Arsenal, you look at Liverpool, you look at City, you know how they're going to play. There's a system and a structure. I get what they're trying to do. You looked at United and you're like, I have no idea what's going on here.
So in our house, there's myself and 2 sons who support United. One of my sons is called Keane with a K.
Nice.
After a famous man.
Nice.
And on particularly midweek games or not games or at night, Audrey, my wife, goes to bed because she said, I do not want to be around 3 moping men crying into their tea or coffee watching United.
I'm already nervous about the weekend. So we're recording this in April, and then we have the City United derby on Sunday, and I'm already kind of going, oh, geez, it's going to be a long Sunday afternoon.
But you know, every now and again they get up for games like that.
It's weird.
Which it tells a whole different story, its own story.
It's amazing the psychology, right? You kind of look at these people and you kind of think that they're like, people think they're machines, whatever, and you look at the lack of confidence that's in that team now. It's fascinating, the impact that can have.
Enterprise Ireland helps to support and fund a vibrant startup ecosystem, providing supports, insights, and network connections to the most ambitious Irish startups. From expert advice to raising funding, exploring opportunities in international markets, to strategic planning, Enterprise Ireland is here to support you in those important startup moments. For more information about how Enterprise Ireland can support you on your startup journey, visit enterprise-ireland.com. Enterprise Ireland, helping Irish startups go global.
Right, quick fire round time. What one book every founder should read?
That's a really hard question for me to answer, because there's a great book written by a guy called James Kerr called Legacy.
Yes, it's brilliant.
Okay, what we can learn from the All Blacks, and it speaks about humility and the experienced players sweeping the dressing room floor after a training session. There's a great book written by a guy called Ryan Harding called Ego is the Enemy.
Oh, yeah.
I've bought quite a number of copies of that book, and I've suggested to people they should read it.
It's very good. I went to see him live there in
Really?
in the concert hall, or no, in the convention centre, and kind of walked in and I kind of turned to my mate and I was like, I actually have no idea what he's going to talk about.
Yeah.
It was all about stoicism. It was okay. He's a better author than he is a speaker.
Yeah.
But it was good. I'm a fan of his writing.
Another book that I have been buying for years called Checklist.
Oh yeah, Apple Go One Day.
Yeah.
It's superb.
I think, a classic is Good to Great by Jim Collins, and I would love if he wrote another version which is Great to Exceptional, because I don't think great is now good enough. I think that people demand, they spend good money with us, and they want exceptional execution. We in Ergo we drive that into people. Great is not good enough. It has to be exceptional.
I think you forgot the title for the book there.
Yeah.
That's your next chapter now. That's literally your next thing you can...
You could be the ghostwriter.
I could just sit down with you for a weekend. We'll go over to Manchester, right? We'll watch a game and then we'll sit down and we'll do a 2-day pod and we'll get the book out of that. Yeah. I'll write the book, me and you'll just talk about it. We're definitely better chatters. And I like writing, but it takes me a long time. Yeah. What's something you had to learn the hard way?
So, not in the early days of the business, and for quite some time, it was all about the business. And quite often, almost every time that I wasn't working or I wasn't present, either, at family events, holidays, etc. And I've got a bit better on that, but that's something that took me a long time. I lost control of my health during that period. I'm slowly getting it back, but things like exercise and eating good, eating well, just were not on my radar.
Really?
Yeah, and that was a real failure of mine. I remember, our kids were still in school, and I'd come home, be 7:30 in the evening, and it's been a tough day, and I used to walk into the house and there'd be a school bag or a kit bag in the middle of the hall, and I'd kick it, and I'd walk through the door and I'd be growling at people. And then as later years went by, I would come into the house and I'd go straight upstairs, change my clothes, and I'd go out and I'd walk for 40 minutes, and I'd come back, and there was a reasonable chance that I was a human being at that point. So I think those kind of things, in a leadership context, undoubtedly there's been times when I have committed to people that I've hired way too long, because I always felt they're nearly there. And even though people around me were saying, it's not happening, no, I can see it. I couldn't.
What would you do today if I give you €10 million?
So I think that's quite easy for me to answer. So my eldest son Connor had a friend from they're in school together. They went to secondary school. They played soccer together. I coached their soccer team, and there was a great guy called Kieran. And Kieran was a gifted child, and Kieran got sick from a virus in second year, became depressed, and he never went back to school. He did do his junior cert without having been in school for 15 months, and did a very, very good junior cert. I remember John, his father, telling me that in John of God's there was 15 teenagers, and half of them were gifted, and be careful what you wish for. Kieran then, just after his 18th birthday, escaped from John of God's with another girl, went to Derry on the bus, stayed in a bed and breakfast, and had researched that the Peace Bridge was manned up to 3:00. And at 3:30, he and the girl jumped, and the girl's body was found within 24 hours. And it was on the 16th of March, and it was early May before the body was found. In fact, on one occasion, I spent a Saturday with his father and some other men walking the riverbank looking for Kieran's body. John, the father, super guy, had a very senior job in CRH, gave it up, went to Trinity to study psychiatry, did a lot of research in the US around step-down facilities. So a teenager in John of God's, is well enough to leave John of God's, but is not well enough to go home, and there's nowhere in the middle. So John is building a facility in County Kildare called Keary Farm. And Keary Farm is currently a place where people who need that step down piece will go and spend a period of months, and they'll work in the farm, and they'll sell their produce in a farm shop, and they have a coffee shop, and they're trying to put that together. And it's John found a similar one of these working in America somewhere, and has now dedicated his full life to this thing. So half of that 10 million, half of that 10 million would go to John. The other half would go to Focus Ireland or similar, because I think, you and I were talking earlier about the amount of money in this country. It's absolutely scandalous that we can't house people. And I don't think it's within the gifts of politicians to solve it. If you take the example of the M50 bridge, which was built by the Roach family and then given back to the state after 30 years when the Roach family got their money out of it. And that's happened with other motorways throughout the country, and were very successful. Why can't that be done through entrepreneurs, through private companies? I think, if you put a bunch of 4 or 5 entrepreneurs together with a skill set they could put a big dent in that, and they'd make money out of it. Same with the hospital. It's just bizarre that we built that hospital in that location. Sorry, to answer your question, so I'd give the other 5 million to homeless charity Focus, or one of those people.
Thank you for that answer, by the way. It's very important to share things like that, and I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's very important that we actually talk about things like that, so thank you. I'm going to give you €1 million. You can only invest in one person or one company. Who is it?
That's really unfair.
That's why it's a good question.
That's like giving your inheritance to one child and not the other. You know that?
I'll let you split it in half.
Okay.
But that's it. That's as far as we go.
So you've split in half. So I'd give half of it to Jack Dunn in Dimpley, and I'd give half of it to Harriet Tracy in Beyond BMI.
There you go.
Yeah.
That was easy enough.
Absolutely.
They're $500,000 richer. If you were starting again in 2025, zero.
Yeah.
No money, no resources. You got to just do your thing. What would you build?
I said earlier that we built this thing with 20,000 punts. Whatever the equivalent amount of money is today, there's no way you'll be able to use that model. I don't know. I really don't know. I know what it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be hospitality. It would probably have a tech element to it. But and it's not that I'm a technologist, far from it, but I think I know enough to know when I'm being bullshitted. And I think I'm reasonably good at putting good teams together. So I would be looking for a big opportunity in the market where it's a big problem. Nothing new, nothing earth-shattering in that. I do think, from a little bit of work that I do now, but the technology and science together, I think, is going to be very powerful. Whether that's AI or other, I don't know. Have you heard of a company called APC?
No.
A guy called Mark Barrett, PhD student, left UCD with his PhD professor and set up a company in Cherrywood. And they test drugs and do small batch manufacturing drugs for large pharma using machine learning and AI. And they do it in a fraction of the time it takes big pharma to do. And they currently have 150 PhDs, going to increase by another 100. And they're building a 100,000 square foot extension. I sit on their advisory board, and my job is to work with their two commercial leads, an Irish guy living in a States and a guy from South America called Rodrigo. Both of them are PhDs. Both of them are responsible for selling. It's a bootstrap business. It's incredibly successful, and it's the best. It's the best example of execution I've seen.
Wow,
it's outstanding.
It's always those companies you've never heard of that are absolutely minting it. They always have quite a generic name, APC. It's always those names. Yeah. It's never the jazzy ones that they spend a lot of money on. It's always those ones. That's cool. Thank you for that. What do you believe that other people would find strange or strongly disagree with you on?
Repeat that, please.
What do you believe that other people would find weird or strongly disagree with you on?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
Thought you'd be a man full of contrarian views.
Not really. I could. I don't think so. I think I'm an individual that can be with a good, strong debate, can be convinced of quite a lot of things. If you can show me the logic, the data, I'm a great believer on making decisions that are data backed and using your gut. Not your gut on its own, but your gut with data, I think is particularly strong and hasn't done me too much harm to this point.
The rational gut. Strong beliefs loosely held. That's the way they have it.
The way I put it.
What's been your worst investment? Can be anything. Can be a company, can be a car, can be anything you want.
So there's a number. We opened a business in Manchester. Okay. The location may have been.
I was just going to say that's genius.
There, right?
That's genius to just go. I'm over to Manchester again this Wednesday on Saturday. Weirdly enough,
yeah, and it's where I learned that if you're not on the ground 5 days a week, 6 days a week, you don't get the performance you need, and that's exactly what happened. I was spending 2 days a week over there. 2 very long days. I'd get the 6:30 flight on Tuesday morning. I'd come back on the 8 o'clock flight on a Thursday. The flight would be full. There was probably only 5 of us were sober. The rest were coming to Dublin for a hen's night or a stag. And I actually got to hate it. But the business was going okay for 2 days a week. I couldn't get it to go 5 days a week. And as critical as I was of people earlier who wouldn't travel, I didn't travel. But if I or one of my colleagues had been there 5 or 6 days a week, who knows? Who knows?
What's been your best investment?
You could say the 10,000 punts seed money that I put into Ergo. So there was some more personal money, not a huge amount because I didn't have it, went into Fenergo, but certainly that connection between Ergo, Fenergo, and so on.
You can trace it all back to that 10,000 punts. Definitely would be the best investment I think ever. What's your final piece of advice for any aspiring founder or founder listening?
I think I've said it already. Be ultra critical in looking at your co-founder. If you have a life partner, make sure he or she is completely aligned. Have your personal debt as low as possible. I only know one way, and that's to go hard. I don't know any other way. I don't know any other scaled business can do it without going hard. What does hard mean? It means long days, long nights. It means weekends, all of that. This is being an entrepreneur in many ways is a lifestyle choice. And the choice is that you don't have a lifestyle until you get that business to a particular place when you can, start paying yourself a decent amount of money, start enjoying the fruits of it, etc. Some people think that comes fast. I never experienced that.
What an epic way to end. I only know one way to go. Go hard. John Purdy, thank you so much. That is absolutely wonderful. Where can people learn a bit more about you and the businesses you're involved in?
So LinkedIn is I'm quite active on LinkedIn. Is probably the best place.
Brilliant. John, you're a gent. Thank you so much for being so
Thank
generous
you. I really
with your time.
enjoyed it. The only thing that was missing was a pint of Guinness.
Next time we'll do it in the snug.
Yeah.
John, thank you so much.
You're welcome.